This program is brought to you by Link TV for educational and non-commercial use only. Mosaic, a daily news program from Link TV, presents a selection of news reports from independent and state-controlled broadcasters from throughout the Middle East.
إسرائيليا تفاوتت ردود الفعل السياسية في إسرائيل على النتائج التي خلص إليها.
In Israel, there have been mixed political reactions to the final report on the Winograd Commission regarding the war in Lebanon. While the report was described as somewhat satisfactory for the Prime Minister Ehud Olmert, some officials in the Labour Party said their party will not withdraw from the government. Meanwhile, the Likud party renewed its demands for earlier elections. In addition, the Mertz Left Party called for the resignation of Olmert without dismantling the Knesset. The Winograd Commission concluded that Israel failed during the Lebanese war on both the military and political levels. However, the Commission didn't hold Olmert directly responsible for Israel's shortcomings. In Lebanon, Hezbollah said that the Winograd final report on the war in Lebanon hid many facts, and it was less harsh than the first report.
من جهته حمل فريق الأكثرية حزب الله مرة أخرى.
The Lebanese majority held Hezbollah accountable for what has become known as the July War. This was the first reaction by the majority to the Winograd report, which concluded that the Israeli army gravely failed during the war in Lebanon.
The large and serious failure findings in the final report of the Winograd Commission have different interpretations in the areas which were destroyed by Israel during the war. Here in the southern suburb of Beirut, where the war left behind massive property damage, the residents are saying that Hezbollah defeated Israel and changed the political equation in the history of its struggle.
Israel and the Arabs never thought that Hezbollah would defeat Israel.
Hezbollah has always been indifferent to any reports issued by Israeli investigative commissions. Moments after the war ended, Hezbollah declared a victory over what it described as the most combatant army in the region. Today, Hezbollah said that the Winograd final report hid many facts and was less harsh than the first report.
We hope that some Lebanese rival and political groups are finally convinced that Lebanon did win the conflict. We also hope that no groups come out and accuse the Winograd Commission of collaboration with the resistance, Hezbollah, and the forces of the Syrian-Iranian axis.
لكن هذا النصر الذي تعتز به المقاومة في لبنان تنظر إليه أطراف سياسية.
However, the victory that the Lebanese resistance was so proud of is being examined from a different angle by certain groups, perhaps due to their political differences. Meanwhile, the Lebanese ruling party held Hezbollah accountable for igniting the war and manipulating the decisions of war and peace.
والتفرد بقرار الحرب والسلم.
The only way to protect the resistance is through a transfer of its leadership from Hezbollah to a giant Lebanese force, which comes in the context of a broad defensive strategy.
Away from the political interpretations, some local civic society organizations are mobilizing international efforts, calling for the indictment of Israeli officials for committing crimes against Lebanese civilians.
The international community is disgusted by the daily massacres committed in Palestine, Lebanon, and other countries. The international community can't remain silent and needs to start moving.
This court of international conscience has found many who support it, and still many who don't care about it. Meanwhile, Lebanese newspapers were indifferent in their coverage of the Winograd report. Those newspapers loyal to the resistance published the Winograd report on their front page. However, in other newspapers, the Winograd report was ignored and overshadowed by other news, such as local weather forecasts. Salam Khudr, Jazeera, Beirut.
It's a day after publication of the Winograd report, and a collective sigh of relief is emanating from the Prime Minister's office. Joining us now from Tel Aviv is IBA's diplomatic correspondent, Leah Zinder. Leah, is Ehud Olmert justified in feeling the worst is behind him?
I believe he is, Laura. The report was better than the Prime Minister had dared hope for. And that was evident, I believe, at this morning's meeting in Tel Aviv of the Qaeda ministers with Ehud Olmert. Especially important for the Prime Minister was the report's finding that the costly operation in the last 60 hours of the war was justified, in the words of the committee, was in fact almost inevitable. The Prime Minister now feels that the moral stigma has been removed from him, and his supporters, in fact, are demanding an apology from the opposition, which they say levelled a blood libel against Ehud Olmert. Now today, the Qaeda ministers showed that they are firmly behind the Prime Minister. Olmert made it clear there was no euphoria, at least he took pains to show that there was none. He knows that approximately 60%, according to the latest polls, of the Israeli public still want him to resign. But Olmert made it quite clear he's not going anywhere, and he said to the ministers they're now going to get down to work and try to correct all the failings that were revealed in the Winograd report. And one more word, Laura, as far as Foreign Minister Tzipi Livni is concerned, we remember she led a half-hearted effort at a coup after the interim report was released. Today, at the meeting with the Qaeda ministers, she made it clear she is behind the Prime Minister, although she also took pains to say that what the committee said about the war being a missed opportunity, those were painful words, she said, which will be difficult for the public to hear, especially for the bereaved parents and for the fighters. Laura.
Leah, is there any sign yet whether Defense Minister Ehud Barak intends to keep his promise and resign from the government with the publication of the report?
No, there's no sign at all yet. It should have been easy for Barak to remain in the government, which is what he really wants to do. But then there's that tricky question, the promise he made to either step down or call early elections once the final report of the Winograd Commission was released. A close that's in daily contact with Ehud Barak told me a short time ago that one thing is clear. Barak had said that within 96 hours he would announce his intentions. Now he's hoping, with the public pressure down, he's going to wait for as long as he possibly can. This source believes that in the end Barak will remain in the government, citing national security and the difficult military challenges that still lie ahead of us. Laura.
Thank you, Leah Zinder, in our Tel Aviv studio.
Thank you.
IDF Chief of Staff Lieutenant General Gabi Ashkenazi has set up a team of senior officers to study the Winograd report and make recommendations. This after the Army took the brunt of the blame for failings during the 2006 Second Lebanon War. We get more in this report by IBA's Dennis Zinn.
The IDF regards the Winograd report as important and is committed to studying its content and correcting the failures. This was the laconic response issued by the Army yesterday, hours before the official publication of the report. The response went on to explain that the General Command is well aware of the deficiencies and began taking corrective methods immediately after the war. It's obvious that the officers who compiled the document were not prepared for the harsh criticism the IDF was about to receive. The Winograd Committee findings describe severe shortcomings in the conduct of the higher echelons of the IDF, which permeated throughout the ranks. The fighting forces were poorly deployed and unprepared, and thus floundered in carrying out missions. The weaknesses were more prominent in the green units, that is, the land-based forces, than the Navy or Air Force. There was no strategic plan. There were communications breakdowns, especially between the General Command in Tel Aviv and the Northern Command. Orders were confused and cryptic. Army discipline was lax. Missions were not carried out. Attacks on the civilian centers were not taken into account sufficiently. The Army generals, on the whole, did not display leadership. The most basic IDF values were disregarded. The criticism goes on and on. The committee did not name names, however. Each clause has a virtual finger pointing at one officer or another who is easily recognizable. This was undoubtedly the gloomiest document ever compiled about the Israeli army. Inside the IDF today, many said the report is one-sided and unfair and is intended to let the political echelon off the hook. Coincidentally, former IDF Chief of Staff Dan Khalutz, who last January resigned his position in the wake of the war, today formally received his discharge from military service. Dennis Zinn, IBA News.
Returning to the Winograd report, and committee member Professor Ruth Gavison summed up the findings in English.
Overall, we regard the Second Lebanon War as a serious missed opportunity. Israel initiated a long war which ended without its clear military victory. A semi-military organization of a few thousand men resisted for a few weeks the strongest army in the Middle East, which enjoyed full air superiority and advantages of size and technology. The barrage of rockets aimed at Israel's civilian population lasted throughout the war, and the IDF did not provide an effective response to it.
Tension between Libya and Israel was running high during a UN Security Council session. The Council members failed to adopt a non-binding resolution on the crisis in Gaza due to the amendments proposed by the United States. Ismat Tarabai reports.
The grim humanitarian conditions in Gaza are lit by nothing more than the candles of hope. There is no food, no fuel, and no medication to sustain the 1.5 million Palestinians. And yet, this tragic situation did not cause one eye to flutter at the Security Council. The 15 council members failed to reach an agreement on the situation in Gaza, so they gave up on the case.
In spite of our pleas and international protest over Israel's intensified blockade and raids on Gaza, no serious measures have been taken, and the situation continues to deteriorate.
If the situation continues to deteriorate, then one can conclude it has something to do with Washington's meddling with the resolution. This news comes as Washington proposed an amendment to the U.S. resolution, which includes an immediate halt to the launching of rockets into Israeli territories. By the same token, Israel must ease up its military measures against the Palestinians. However, the U.S.'s double-standard policy always works in the interest of Israel, which holds people accountable for their words, but not their actions.
Characteristically, the permanent observer of Palestine to the UN used the word occupation 13 times, but he never mentioned the word Hamas. My dear friend, this is the real world. It is the Security Council, not a theater.
The UN Security Council may not be a stage. However, the humanitarian situation in Palestine seems to be taking a turn for the worse. Meanwhile, Arab ambassadors are preparing to draft a resolution and submit it to the UN General Assembly in an attempt to rally broad support among the international community, which may help break Israel's wall of aggression in the occupied territories.
Pertaining to the courageous prisoners in the occupation's prisons, His Excellency Mahmoud Abbas said that they want peace more than anyone else. Abbas addressed the Israelis saying, if you want peace, then all the prisoners must be released, confirming that peace must be established based on justice and international law.
تحدثت مع الصحفيين الإسرائيليين وقلت لهم لنا 11,000 أسير.
I told Israeli journalists that we have 11,000 prisoners. Olmert said that this does not concern him. Why is he keeping these people in prison? If you want peace, then these people should not remain in captivity. We all know that our political prisoners want peace and seek it more than anyone. Their release will generate support among voters for the peace process. If what you really desire is for the peace process to happen, then you must release all these prisoners. Then you will see that these people want peace along with you. We want peace along with you. Take advantage of this opportunity. Do not waste it. We are not the only ones who will be subject to danger. You will also be subject to danger.
اغتنموا هذه الفرصة لا تضيعوها وإلا فالخطر
We are not the only ones who need peace. You also need peace. Peace must be established on the principles of justice. We are not saying absolute justice. Rather, we are saying relative justice that is based on international law. If you do not agree with this, then frankly this means that you do not want peace. You do not want security and stability. I have even told Israeli journalists that the Arab and Muslim worlds are showing a greater interest in the peace process now than at any other period in the past. They have expressed their willingness to establish diplomatic relations with you if you withdraw from the Palestinian and Arab lands. You should take advantage of this historic opportunity because it will not come again. 57 Arab and Muslim countries are willing to normalize their relations with you if you withdraw and give the Palestinians their rights. I do not know what is preventing you from giving us these rights.
ما الذي يمنعكم من إعطائنا هذه الحقوق؟
أهلا بكم من جديد. نكمل عراقيا، حيث قال رئيس الوزراء العراقي نوري المالكي إن العملية العسكرية المرتقبة ضد مسلحي القاعدة.
Iraqi Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki said that anticipated military operations against al-Qaeda militants in the city of Mosul will be decisive. The commander of the U.S. troops in northern Iraq, General Mark Hertling, cautioned using such terms to describe joint military operations between Iraqi and American forces.
وأشار المتحدث باسم وزارة الدفاع العراقية محمد العسكري إلى أن الهدف من
Iraqi Defense Minister spokesperson Mohammed al-Asqari said that the aim of the operation is not only to cleanse the city from al-Qaeda militants, but to also make the streets and neighborhoods secure for all citizens. Meanwhile, Iraqi forces went into the city of Mosul with a state of readiness and alertness to search for al-Qaeda militants based in the city. Joining us from Mosul is Al-Iraqiya's correspondent Ahmed Saleh. Ahmed, tell us about the atmosphere surrounding this operation described as decisive by Al-Maliki.
There are military forces advancing, with the new Iraqi troops joining the forces that are currently stationed north of Mosul city. It's really an attempt to control the land, if we can describe it as such. The city of Mosul has not been under the control of any real authority since the fall of the former Iraqi regime. There might have been some areas that were controlled, but not all of it, which made the city become a center for major militant groups. Mosul is considered one of the hardest areas to control in Iraq and the most volatile. Now that the situation in Ramadi is under control, Mosul has become the primary threat to official forces and the locals. The locals are filled with anticipation, horror, and fear from the forthcoming operations, not because they think the operation will harm them, but they are afraid of a backlash from the militants. So there is fear, but there is also hope that this operation will achieve its objective of returning security into the area.
How about a time frame? Did the Iraqi or the multinational forces provide a specific date for the start of the operations?
So far, they have not provided a set time, but the Iraqi forces say that the coming few days will mark the actual beginning of the operation. There is continuous coordination and some operations have begun, particularly in regards to intelligence and communication, with prominent people in Mosul, as well as some representatives from Al-Sawa, the Awakening Council of Local Tribes.
أبدأ
The residents in the area of Shuala expressed frustration over repeated raids and searches of their homes by the multinational forces, despite the fact that the security situation is leveling off in the city.
In addition, the residents urged the local authority to intervene and put an end to these types of operations.
During a quiet night and under warm blankets, the residents of Shuala took refuge from a stormy night that included lightning and thunder. However, moments later, the sky lit up, not by the lightning anymore, but by the falling bombs fired on the Shuala neighborhood in Baghdad. Several homes were destroyed in the attack.
The residents were terrified. This is the third time they raided our home. We don't have weapons here, and we're not fighting anyone, neither the Americans nor the Iraqis.
What have women and children done to deserve this? They continue to carry out home raids every night at 1 and 3 a.m. There's no need for this. This area is very secure. Everyone knows that the city of Shuala is a secure area and free of terrorist activities.
The residents were somewhat lucky because the raids took place during the winter rather than during the summer, when many families choose to sleep on the rooftops to escape from the scorching temperatures. Meanwhile, the residents called on the Iraqi authority to intervene and put an end to these attacks.
They have no respect for anyone, including women, children, and families. They keep on targeting this area.
We are pleading to the Iraqi government for help. Look what they did to us. I'm a disabled man, and they took away my son. We don't have anything to hide. My son is a worker in the area of Jubba.
Everyone in Iraq likes to see that the laws of their country are enforced and the criminals are pursued and brought to justice. However, this shouldn't be done at the expense of these poor families whose homes were destroyed and whose children were either killed or arrested.
إذا مشروع قرار عقوبات جديد ومحاولة للهروب من الحقائق الإيرانية موضوع هذه الحلقة. أبدأ مع ضيفي في الاستوديو السيد أمير الموسوي خبير.
My guest today is Amr al-Musa, an expert in strategic affairs. Welcome, Amr al-Musa. Let us analyze the recent developments regarding the Iranian nuclear file. Despite all the recent political developments, including the positive ones, such as the statements that were made by officials from the IAEA, despite all these developments, we notice some countries are trying to impose new sanctions on Iran through the UN Security Council. What is the significance of this from Iran's perspective?
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. في الحقيقة الإدارة الأمريكية حاولت استباق تقرير الدكتور البرادعي.
In the name of God, the merciful, the compassionate. The American administration has tried to bring about a resolution against Iran's nuclear file before the IAEA's report is released. The U.S. tried during the meetings in Berlin to convince the Chinese and the Russians to support the passage of a resolution against Iran before the release of the report. Of course, this has not happened due to Iranian diplomatic maneuvers. Iranian officials warned the IAEA and Western countries not to escalate the situation because this may affect Iran's willingness to cooperate with the IAEA. This includes statements made by Parliament Speaker Dr. Haddad Adel, Foreign Minister Dr. Al-Muttaqi, and even the Iranian President himself. I believe that the diplomatic maneuvers which took place last week convinced some influential countries at the UN Security Council, including China, Russia, and non-permanent members such as South Africa, not to support the US position. At the same time, I think that Russia and China exerted a great deal of effort to improve the language of the draft resolution that was submitted by the US to the Security Council in coordination with France and Britain. The US draft resolution was too extreme. The language of the draft resolution was changed and some amendments were made to it. In addition, Iran's efforts have managed managed to delay the discussion of this draft resolution at the UN Security Council. This delay may help some countries who are demanding that the Security Council wait for the IAEA's report, which will be submitted by Dr. Mohammed al-Baradei. I think that this report will be positive towards the Islamic Republic of Iran. Tehran cooperated completely with the IAEA.
سيكون إيجابيا ولصالح الجمهورية الإسلامية الإيرانية بسبب التعاون الكامل الذي بذلته طهران مع الوكالة الدولية للطاقة.
طيب إذا كانت كل الدلائل تشير إلى هذه النقطة فيما يتعلق
There are several indications that the IAEA's report will be positive. Why are some countries opposed to the IAEA's report?
تشير إليه الوكالة الدولية أو تتوقعه إيران في هذا السياق؟
Yes, the American administration wants to preempt the IAEA's report, which will be released 2 months from now. This will be the third piece of evidence showing that U.S. policy is wrong. The first piece of evidence was Dr. al-Baradei's first report. The second evidence was the U.S. intelligence report, which showed that Iran's nuclear program was peaceful. If Dr. al-Baradei's report is released and is read at the UN Security Council, then it will become the third piece of evidence, and it will expose the hostile policy towards Iran.
Now, if you're a regular user of the internet, I know I am, you'll know how frustrating it is when it goes down. Well, a fault in a cable off the coast of Egypt has left tens of millions of internet users either without any access or with a very slow connection. The main internet connection runs from Sicily to Egypt, but the final users extend far beyond North Africa. Outages are causing difficulties in countries like Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Dubai, India and Pakistan. Well, India is also severely affected with only half the normal bandwidth currently available to feed its high-tech industry. Officials say it could be over a week until repairs are completed. Well, Kavita Rajaseka is an IT expert with a leading international publishing house in Dubai. She joins me on Al Jazeera. Thanks for joining us, Savita. Now, what does today's loss of the internet mean for Dubai's businesses and stock market, for example?
I think at the first stage, it simply means a loss of efficiency and productivity. That's what people have been telling me. I made a lot of calls today, spoke to some banks, I spoke to some transaction-based companies, and what they say is that things have been really slow. They've not been able to work at their normal pace, which means I think people are pretty much having a bit of a forced holiday in a sense.
In terms
so
of the
literally this means...
No, sorry, please carry on.
What they say is that, you know, some of them are having delays and some of them, I mean, I don't think any of them said they're completely out of, you know, communication simply because they have backup lines and they seem to have redundancy built in. But basically everybody is very frustrated that efficiency levels have really dipped since yesterday.
In the age of the sort of global world we live in, how does the internet disruption in one place actually affect another? You sort of touched upon it just then.
See, the thing is that today businesses aren't operating, you know, in the country that they exist in. It's pretty much a global world today. So companies in this region are collaborating on an everyday basis, even minute-by-minute basis with countries anywhere else in the world. And I think a lot of communication and collaboration happens through the internet because it's quicker, it's a lot more affordable. We're all living in an internet-based world. So I think pretty much if business shuts down here, you're not able to interact as effectively with your partners who are sitting anywhere else in the world. So yes, it does have a knock-on effect.
Just briefly, Kavita, is there an alternative if the internet goes down besides the fax machine?
I think you have to go back to a manual world today. I think start making those calls, you know, knock on more doors. You wouldn't be able to communicate as quickly as you normally do.
Kavita Rajaseka joining us there from Dubai. Thank you very much.
Get more news about the Middle East online at linktv.org/Mosaic. The Mosaic webpage offers a complete archive of Mosaic programs, program transcripts, the Mosaic video podcast, and the Mosaic Intelligence Report, a weekly analysis of the hottest stories from the Middle East. The views expressed on Mosaic are those of the participating broadcasters, not Link TV or its sponsors. The production of Mosaic is made possible with the support of viewers like you. Thank you. This program was brought to you by Link TV for educational and non-commercial use only. Link TV is the only U.S. television network devoted to global and national news, with uncompromising documentaries and diverse cultural programs. Programs which connect you to the world.